What's going on, everybody? Today's video is going to be quite different than most of the videos you see me post on here. Initially, when I wanted to start a YouTube channel, I was considering doing a YouTube channel on boxing. But then I ended up going to video games because I felt that a lot more happens in the video game industry and it's more interactive. I can actually show you things and do things myself as opposed to boxing. I don't box. But boxing is my huge passion. I am not a casual boxing fan. I am a very hardcore boxing fan. I've been following it since I was a little kid. I was into martial arts. I did some boxing. I've been punched in the face. I've punched people in the face. So I know what I'm talking about in many different aspects of the sport and combat sports in general. So I would like to give my breakdown of the huge fight coming out next week. It's a week from today, so we got 7 more days. The Manny Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather showdown, May 2nd. So I want to get into that, but I just wanted to kind of give you my background and as far as what my opinion is. I'm just not somebody getting up here who want to talk about this big mega fight, even though there are a lot of other fights I want to talk about, but that's not what primarily this channel is. This channel more so is video games and films, but this is a special event. This is a once-in-a-lifetime thing, as many of you know. Some of you may not. Believe it or not, as huge as this thing is, there's still some people out there who they're just not hardcore fans. It's kind of like, I liken it to like the Super Bowl, where you have your hardcore football fans, then you have your gamblers, and then you just have everybody else who tunes in. This is going to be kind of like that. So I'm going to ask you to bear with me because this video is going to be longer than usual because honestly, I don't cover boxing too much. So there's a lot of things that I definitely want to get across in this video. So just bear with me, even if you're not a big boxing fan. Like I said, I'm probably not going to do too many more of these videos, but if you guys really like it and I get a good reaction, who knows, maybe one day I'll start a boxing channel, YouTube channel, a separate one from what I'm doing here. But this fight I have to address. It's the biggest fight of our time, and I feel like I need to put it on record and make it official and chime in. So anyway, let's get started. So the first thing I want to address is going to be the allegations of performance-enhancing drugs thrown at Manny Pacquiao. Now, at the time initially when Mayweather and Pacquiao were first doing their first negotiations, at that time it would have been a lot easier for the fight to have taken place. They both were the top 1 and 2 pound-for-pound fighters. They both were fighting under HBO and Top Rank, which is where Pacquiao promotional company is, and Mayweather at the time, he was on the Golden Boy. They were doing a lot of fights together on HBO. So at that time, it would have been a lot more realistic to see that match. Unfortunately, somewhere during the negotiations, Mayweather had decided to do something unprecedented because we had never seen this in boxing before, where he was challenging Manny Pacquiao or demanding Manny Pacquiao to go through USADA to get drug tested. Now, USADA, they are frequently known for doing performance-enhancing drug tests on athletes, in particular in the Olympics, and they have quite a shady history, to put it lightly. I don't even want to get into that, but if you look up information on them, you can see that they've scrapped P-tests, and they've I believe that the Lance Armstrong guy and Marion Jones and a lot of these people were kind of getting away with stuff under USADA. But anyway, Mayweather was demanding that. And at the time, we had never seen that in boxing. And Manny Pacquiao was like, okay, why are you throwing this on me all of a sudden? Now, I'm going to pause right there. The reason why Floyd was pushing that on Manny is because a lot of people felt, and I think this was conjured up by Floyd, that Manny was steamrolling the competition and that he was moving up in weight, which in boxing, if you don't know, Manny Pacquiao has a record that's probably not going to be broken for a while. He's a eight world division champion or whatever. He's won titles in 8 different weight divisions. Nobody else has ever done that. So that's a big, big deal. So a lot of people saying, how did he go from being this, skinny guy, moving up in weight and knocking out all these people? Well, that's a rumor. That's not true. If you look at the facts, once Manny Pacquiao started hitting about 147 pounds, hitting the welterweight division, he was not knocking guys out. He stopped Miguel Cotto at a catchweight. He didn't knock him out cold. The referee stopped the fight. Same thing with De La Hoya. De La Hoya quit on the stool going into, I think, the 11th round or something like that. He knocked out Ricky Hatton. They were fighting at 140 pounds, not 147. 140 pounds, he had knocked out Ricky Hatton. But Ricky Hatton was also knocked out by Floyd Mayweather, and Mayweather isn't known as a big puncher. Ricky Hatton has a glass jaw, and he rushes in head first, and that's why he got put out. Ricky Hatton would get put out by just about any, solid puncher with some speed and timing. So anyway, going back to the allegations, Pacquiao was not steamrolling people. The guys that he was fighting, believe it or not, at the time, those welterweights, those aren't guys that typically get knocked out. So one of the arguments that I hear is, well, when Floyd Mayweather asked Pacquiao to do the test and Pacquiao refused, those negotiations broke down, and all of a sudden, Pacquiao stopped knocking out people. So the assumption from some people is that Pacquiao all of a sudden didn't have the power to knock out guys because he wasn't taking the PEDs because Mayweather had pushed this on him. That's totally not what happened. Manny Pacquiao was fighting guys in 147 that won at 147. They don't typically get knocked out. These are very iron chin guys that are really tough. I'll give you some names. Joshua Clottey, he doesn't get knocked out. Timothy Bradley, he doesn't get knocked out. Brandon Rios, he does not get knocked out. Antonio Margarito has been knocked out, but known as a really, really strong, tough guy, Mexican fighter, takes a beating and really doesn't get hurt in that way. Juan Manuel Marquez, he also doesn't typically get knocked down. He's been knocked down, but he gets up and he keeps fighting. And then you have Chris Algieri, which is another one, Manny Pacquiao's latest opponent, who has been on the canvas but gets up and keeps fighting and really has a good chin. So if you look at the competition that Manny has taken on, he has taken on guys that can take a punch. And he's also taking on guys that are much bigger than him. So yeah, he's been steamrolling most of these guys and beating them decisively, but he's not putting them out. So the idea that Manny Pacquiao's been doing this to people at 147 coming from, 125 or whatever, it's ludicrous. That's not how it's been happening. And I think if you really look up the information and look at it that way, you will realize that it's just nonsense. Now, during that first bit of negotiations, when Manny Pacquiao's team decided, hey, we're not going to go through USADA. This is ridiculous. You've never asked this of anybody else. Why would I do that? If you're a top pound for pound fighter and you're going to fight another top pound for pound fighter, you normally don't have somebody just throw in something that's never been done before into that fight, into the negotiations, because then the other side is going to feel like, okay, why are you singling me out? Is it you don't want to fight? What's going on? And I think that's been the suspicion on Manny Pacquiao's camp from the Floyd Mayweather side. And in all fairness, Pacquiao did sue and take Mayweather to court, and they did settle. And part of that whole thing is, I would imagine that if I was Floyd Mayweather and I made those kind of accusations and then I was sued by it, you have to show some kind of proof. You have to go in there into that courtroom and say, look, this is why, and this is why. Manny Pacquiao was willing to go to court, willing to show his medical history, willing to take any kind of drug tests that they wanted, willing to do anything. And Mayweather had no evidence and therefore had to settle. And we don't know what the amount of money is that they settled on, but I'm sure it was significant, at least significant to us. But it's been significant enough to the point where Mayweather is not making those accusations anymore. another thing Floyd would have to do with making those accusations if he went to court, he would also have to probably subject himself to scrutiny as well. And him, with USADA and some of their history, it probably would have been a big spotlight on him as well. So that probably wouldn't have been a good idea. So also, Pacquiao agreed to the test, but he didn't want to have the test done on the day of the fight. And I can understand that, because when he fought Morales, he had taken a blood test prior to the fight, and he felt drained and he felt weak. Now, Morales is a Mexican legend, great fighter. And by the time Manny was going into him, he was already going to be considered a future Hall of Famer in Eric Morales. So when he fought, they fought 3 times. Manny lost the first fight, won the next 2 fights. He felt that he was drained in the first fight. He felt that he was weak. He felt that he wasn't at his best. Whether that was mental, whether that was, a real physical a reaction to the blood tests, I don't know. I've never been in that situation. I don't think any of us can really, say one way or the other how Manny Pacquiao physically felt. But it affected him. So he said, yeah, I can take the test right up before the fight, and I can take the test right after the fight, but I don't want to do it on the day of the fight. So the negotiations broke down. And it's unfortunate because the fight didn't happen when they were in their prime. Now, fast forwarding, there have been a lot of different negotiations. The $40 million Floyd had offered him. A lot of people was like, oh, but that's the biggest payday Manny has ever had. Why would he not take that? The reason why he wouldn't take it is because he wasn't going to get anything else. And this fight is worth a lot more than that. Any idiot can see that. Of course, if you say, yeah, $40 million, that sounds great. But in actuality, this fight that's happening May 2nd, both fighters are going to earn over $100 million. Manny Pacquiao is a congressman in the Philippines. What kind of idiot? How would he look? He would look like a fool if he would have taken that. So for anybody, again, on the Floyd side to say, oh, well, he didn't take the $40 million, he's just ducking Floyd. No, you got to understand business. And everybody loves Floyd Mayweather's business mind. But the fact of the matter is, Manny Pacquiao has a business mind too. He's a congressman in the Philippines. And, he's not going to take a business decision like that. So obviously now they have the 60-40 split, which I think is fair. Mayweather is the A side, Pacquiao is the B side, and he's going to get the smaller cut. And that's just the way it is. Let me clear up one thing. A lot of people say that Floyd Mayweather is scared of Manny Pacquiao. Now, I'm going to say that there's some truth to it, but I'm not going to use the word scared, because I think if you're a boxer and you're a fighter, it's not like when you or I, the average person, gets into a street fight with someone, your nerves and you're scared and it's probably unexpected, but you're gonna fight anyway. It's not that kind of fear that boxers have. These guys train for weeks on weeks, preparing for their opponent. Sometimes it's years they're mentally preparing to fight a particular person. So yeah, the anticipation and the build-up, they have the jitters, but this is what they do for a living. They get punched in the face and they punch people in the face for a living. So I don't think Floyd was physically scared to fight Manny. But I think when Floyd looked around and he looked at his business decisions again, he said, okay, I can fight Victor Ortiz and make almost as much money. I'm not going to make the same, but I can make almost as much money and he's a less of a threat. I can fight a Robert Guerrero, he's less of a threat. I can fight a Ricky Hatton, he's less of a threat. And I think with that mentality, Floyd was like, okay, well, maybe one day the fight will happen, but the hype will keep building and I'll keep beating these guys and making millions. And he's done that. And to his credit, now this is the biggest fight of all time. I don't think that was intended quite that way, but this is what's going to happen. So physically scared, I don't know, but I think he understands, and most people understand, that Manny Pacquiao is the biggest threat to his undefeated record. And I think one of the things that Floyd has done is he's built himself up as the villain in a lot of the fights. The outspoken, loud, arrogant, pompous, rich, athlete. And a lot of people dislike that. So I think Floyd understands that a lot of his pay-per-view buys is because people are tuning in to watch him lose. Let's be honest here. boxing fans and even casual boxing fans aren't tuning in to see his, defensive abilities. People tune into these fights usually because they want to see a fight. Mayweather doesn't really give you that. So why are people tuning in to see Mayweather fight? It's because they want to see him lose. And if he's fighting on Cinco de Mayo and he's fighting a Mexican person, well, it's genius. Mexican people want to see him lose because he's been beating all their Mexican fighters. So every time a new Mexican fighter comes in, everybody's going crazy, getting the pay-per-views. We want to see Mayweather lose. So I think Mayweather understands that if he lost to Manny, his pay-per-view numbers immediately shoot down because now he's already got the loss and now it's not going to be as prestigious. So as far as fear is concerned, I don't think it was physical fear. I think it was more business fear as to what he's going to be able to do. So if you want to chalk that up as a fear of getting beat up or fear of a loss or fear of whatever, you can do that. Because in my opinion, I do believe that he has been ducking Manny Pacquiao. In fact, not just Manny, but other fighters that are a big threat to him. I mean, you have Sergio Martinez in his prime, Paul Williams in his prime, Shane Mosley in his prime, Miguel Cotto in his prime. Fighters today like Timothy Bradley or Keith Thurman, he's not fighting any of these guys. Why would he take that risk when he can fight, guys like Robert Guerrero, fighters like Ricky Hatton, Marcos Maidana? You can say that, okay, well, he fought Canelo Alvarez. Canelo Alvarez, that actually was the biggest threat to his record that he could fight on paper. But if you really look at Canelo Alvarez, he's really flat-footed and he's a perfect match for Floyd. Okay, so here's my breakdown of the actual fight. Now, I see this going possible several different ways. Anybody who's going to tell you definitively Mayweather in 8 rounds, which is a ludicrous thing because Mayweather isn't a knockout artist. So even if he does knock out Manny, for anybody to predict that, you're stupid to predict that because you're just throwing something out because this is what I guess you're fantasizing about or whatever. You really don't know boxing. You can't make that kind of prediction. And anybody who's going in there and saying that, Manny Pacquiao is gonna, knock out Mayweather in the first round or the third round, that's another thing. These two guys, they're at the top of their game. Usually elite fighters like this, they usually don't get knocked out. More than likely it goes 12 rounds. So let me give you different scenarios as to what I think can happen, not actual predictions. I'll give my prediction at the end. First case scenario, the fight starts and Mayweather, he's an orthodox fighter. Pacquiao is a southpaw. So for those who don't know, Mayweather is right-handed, Pacquiao is left-handed. This poses a problem typically in boxing because if you're a right-handed fighter, your stance is like this, and you're pumping your jab out with your left hand and you're hitting with your right. If you're a left-handed fighter, it's the other way around. You're pumping with your right arm and your jab and you're hitting with your left. So if you have two guys who are facing each other and they're opposite hands, then their lead foot is going to be touching and their lead hand is going to be facing in the same direction. This kind of makes it difficult more so for the orthodox fighter, more so for the right-handed fighter. The reason why is because the right-handed fighter is used to fighting right-handed fighters because they're more righties than lefties. Now, the left-handed fighter is usually more used to fighting right-handed fighters, again, for the same reason, because right-handed fighters are way more common. So Pacquiao is much more accustomed to fighting right-handed fighters like Floyd, where Floyd has only fought, I believe, 8 left-handed fighters of the 47 fights that he's had. So this is going to be a little bit of a change for Floyd. Now, he does have experience, and obviously he's won every single fight that he's fought in the pros. That's debatable. I actually don't think he's won every fight, but he's gotten a decision or gotten a nod on every single fight. But anyway, so he's running into the southpaw thing. And Mayweather in the past, whether you want to agree with it or not, has been hit more often by southpaw fighters or hit more cleanly by southpaw fighters. The reason why is because Mayweather has the shoulder roll defense, which is designed for right-handed fighters. That's what it is. He puts his left hand up here and he has his other hand over here and he's doing the shoulder roll. He's turning his shoulder, so when they're swinging their right hand, he's catching it with the shoulder and he's protecting his chin and protecting his head as he's dipping out. When he fights left-handed fighters, they're not swinging their right hand, they're pushing their left hand, which brings him more open on this side. So one of the scenarios that we can have in this fight is that Mayweather comes in and he's ultra defensive and he's moving a lot, because we haven't seen a lot of movement from Floyd in the last couple of fights. I think in the second Maidana fight, in the first 3 rounds, he was moving around a lot. But then once he got clocked in the end of that third round, I noticed that he was a lot more flat-footed. He wasn't moving as much. And that's kind of been the trend with Floyd. But if Floyd fights like the way he fought Canelo, where he's constantly moving around and he's not allowing Pacquiao to get set on his punches, I'm not going to say that he's going to totally dominate that way or win, but he's going to have a better opportunity to stay away from Manny's punches. The thing that you got to worry about on the Manny end of it, that Floyd has to worry about, is that Manny throws punches at strange angles and he doesn't have to be planted to hurt you. And that's something that Floyd isn't used to. He's used to fighting these flat-footed guys. In fact, in the last, I don't know, maybe 10 fights that Floyd's had, he hasn't fought anybody who's really got great foot movement. If you look at his past fighters, you look at Guerrero, flat-footed. Victor Ortiz, flat-footed. Canelo Alvarez, great hand speed, powerful guy, but extremely flat-footed. That guy doesn't move. He's like he's walking in quicksand. Marcos Maidana, he's flat-footed. He just comes in, head down, and swings. So if you look at those guys, Mayweather hasn't fought anybody with a lot of foot movement. Even Ricky Hatton, which was considered more of a faster-moving guy, isn't really a guy who uses much footwork. Shane Mosley, by the time Mayweather fought him, wasn't really moving around the ring a lot. And to be honest, Shane Mosley isn't really that kind of fighter. The best fighter that Floyd has fought in the last 10 years that had decent foot movement was Zab Judah. And Zab Judah had some good success. And Zab Judah also happens to be a southpaw early in the fight. So the first scenario, like getting back to that, what I think Floyd has to use the ring to get away from Manny Pacquiao's onslaught, and he also has to counter. If Floyd does that, there's a good possibility that he's going to win a decision. Now, the second scenario is that Floyd starts the fight off that way, but then starts to get worn out in the later rounds. And then Pacquiao starts coming in and tagging him, possibly stopping him or possibly getting a decision late. If Floyd doesn't start the fight well early, but is moving around and Manny Pacquiao steals a couple of early rounds, and then Floyd starts to slow down later on in the fight, Manny Pacquiao is going to win an easy decision. And that's the second scenario that I can possibly see happening. Another one would be is that Floyd decides, okay, I'm going to surprise everyone and I'm going to go directly at Manny and start, pressuring him early and walking him down. In the past, Floyd has done that, where he will start walking down his fighters. He's not necessarily throwing punches at them because he's not a volume puncher, but he's walking them down. He'll tag them a couple of times and show them, hey, I'm going to be in your face and you're still not going to hit me and I'm going to hurt you a couple of times. And that discourages a lot of fighters from throwing. I think if he does that against Manny Pacquiao, it's going to be the biggest mistake that he could make. Because Manny Pacquiao is too quick and too strong and has too great of footwork to allow that to happen. And I'm going to explain to you why in more of a technical aspect. Manny Pacquiao does a lot of side-to-side movements. Now, what happens when you have a fighter doing a lot of that kind of movements is that they do what's called, they turn fighters. And Manny Pacquiao is the master at it. He's the best at it. So here's Mayweather. He's in his his little stance or whatever, and sometimes he'll fight with his hands down. If he's walking down Pacquiao, he's gonna have his defense up. He's gonna have his hands up. He's walking towards Manny. What Manny's gonna do is he's gonna jump to the side, to the left or the right side. More than likely, he's gonna jump to Floyd's left side. So Manny's right. So and that's typically what Manny likes to do. So he'll jump to that side, and it's gonna force Floyd to pivot. Now, if Floyd is able to use his legs and make that turn, he's going to be a little safer. But if he turns his body first, by the time he turns his body, Manny Pacquiao jumps there, he's going to get tagged. And I think that's going to be part of the strategy, is that they're going to try to set Floyd up with the right hooks, because when Mayweather is up here, Manny Pacquiao throws the right hook and he's going to be more open over here. So I think they're going to try to get Mayweather to be looking out for that punch and then turning him. And when they turn him, they're going to catch him with the left. I think that's going to be part of the strategy that Roach is going to try to implement into the fight. Whether it's going to be successful or not is going to depend on the fighters. But I think if you look at the way Floyd fights and if you look at the way Manny Pacquiao fights, the both of these guys have very specific things that they do that are quite successful. Another thing I want to point out is Mayweather's defense. Everybody talks about Mayweather's defense, and he's going to pick Manny Pacquiao apart, going into a couple of the mid to late rounds. A lot of the times when we see Mayweather picking guys apart, and I'm just going to say this, and you can look at the history yourself, it's because these guys get tired. They're swinging for the fences, and they're missing all these punches, and they're flat-footed fighters, and they're tired. I don't think it's so much that Mayweather is totally just picking them apart. I think stamina plays a big role in it. Mayweather's conditioning is superb. So you go into the 6th, 7th round and you haven't really hit Mayweather with anything. One, you're discouraged, and two, you're tired. And, and he's got that wonderful, jab to the stomach that he does, which it's very, very underrated punch, especially body punches. I think the best fighters implement body punches in their repertoire of moves. And I think Mayweather does that well, and he wears down his opponents. It's not so much that he's picking them apart, is that they're gassed by the time they get to that 7th, 8th round. If you look at the Canelo fight, he was tired. He was done. Maidana had energy, strong energy through most of the fight, and that's why it looked like maybe he wasn't quite getting picked apart, but he just doesn't have the boxing ability to beat Floyd. Even though I thought in the first fight he had a real close fight, Maidana maybe even pulled it off. I thought the second fight, Bayless totally prevented Maidana from doing anything. But anyway, this video is going longer than I wanted it to, but those are the different scenarios that I can possibly see happening. So one more point I want to break down before I give my final prediction. That's Mayweather's right hand. Mayweather has a really slick way of luring his opponents into his right hand. Typically what he does is he waits for the opponent to jab. A lot of boxers have this bad habit, in fact, where they throw a jab and then their hands stay down. So Mayweather, of course, naturally takes advantage of that. As soon as they throw the jab, Mayweather knows the distance so well that he knows that they're not going to hit him. He positions himself in such a way where he can kind of gauge it just by looking. And as soon as they go, he kind of brings himself forward a little bit. And when they go to tag him, he pulls back and pops that right hand and catches them constantly. He does this. It's one of his best moves. It's a signature move of Mayweather. This is the one weakness where I think Pacquiao could be in a little bit of trouble, because he is a little bit susceptible to right hands. Now, Mayweather doesn't have the greatest punching power. So with that straight right hand, is he going to knock down Pacquiao? Probably not. But what he's going to do is he's going to discourage Pacquiao from coming in. That is a very likely scenario that could happen. The only thing is that Manny lunges in with that left hand, and Mayweather's going to be looking out for that. So he might be the one that actually might be a little gun shy as far as throwing that right hand is concerned, because he does not want to leave himself open. So that's going to be a really interesting scenario.
It's that Calamity reunion.
Okay, so my final prediction for the fight, I believe that Manny Pacquiao will come out victorious in this fight. I think it's going to go to distance. More than likely it will. It's a possible knockout on either side or a late stoppage, but I think just given my breakdown and everything that I've been paying attention to, not all the hype and everything involved with this fight, just looking at what they've done in their last couple of fights and their fighting style, I believe that Manny Pacquiao has what it takes to beat Floyd Mayweather. I think he probably would have been a lot more effective a few years ago, but I still think that he has the fresher legs of the two. I think he's the quicker of the two. And I think he has the power to keep Floyd running and keep Floyd hesitant on throwing punches. So, anyway, that's what I think. There always is the possibility of a knockout on either end. Manny Pacquiao has been knocked out before. You can't discount that. But I don't think he's the kind of fighter that dwells on that kind of thing. And given his faith and given the way he feels about everything, I think he feels like, it's God's plan. And for some odd reason, he's where he's at because everything that's happened. So I don't think that plays in his head as much. And then Manny Pacquiao also has incredible punching power, especially for such a little guy, and speed. So there's always that possibility that he can catch Floyd as well. So that's what makes this fight interesting is, can Floyd put out Manny? Can Manny catch Floyd and put him out? Are they going to fight that style? Is Floyd going to, as you've heard the expression, stink up the joint? Is he going to just run the whole fight? If he does, he may win a decision. It's not going to be pretty. People aren't going to like it. But he may win a decision. But he also may lose the decision by then because, as Mike Tyson said, because Mike Tyson predicted that Manny would win. Mike Tyson said that Pacquiao's so fluid, he's like perpetual motion. He moves in and out, boom, 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 and he's out, and he's quick, and he's fast, and he throws so many punches. Floyd isn't going to be able to win by throwing, 20 punches around when Manny is throwing, 70 punches around. It's going to look like a lopsided win. If Manny Pacquiao was a flat-footed fighter and Floyd was pot-shotting him and catching him here and there, and Manny was missing, 60% of his punches, then you can justify Floyd winning. But that's not what's going to happen in this fight. Manny's in and out, he's quick, and even if he misses a lot of the punches, if Mayweather's spending the majority of his time dodging and only popping Pacquiao, 3 or 4 times in a round, I don't see how he wins that decision. So that's another aspect that makes it more interesting. Because is Mayweather going to have to adapt in a way where he's going to be more aggressive? And if he's more aggressive, does that open him up to get hit more? This is what makes this fight really interesting. So without being, a Mayweather fan or a Pacquiao fan, I would hope that a lot of you would look at this objectively. And I'm a Pacquiao fan. As far as outside of the ring, I think Pacquiao is a much better role model. He's just a better person than Mayweather. I hate to say it, but Mayweather is done a lot of despicable things in his life and his career. I don't understand how, people are so supportive of the guy as far as, his character, and they admire that character. I think he's despicable, to be honest with you. But what he does in the ring, you can't deny it's pretty amazing. I just think maybe some of it is a little bit overrated. I think the praise that he gets is outrageous. The latest comments that he said he's the best ever and better than Ali. Well, he's been saying he's the best ever for a couple of fights now. The whole TBE. But when he's saying that he's better than Muhammad Ali and a lot of the other greats, I think it's ridiculous to even compare. Muhammad Ali wasn't dodging people. He fought anybody who came in front of him. He fought them multiple times. Even when he was on a decline, he fought the scariest and the most toughest fighter of that time in George Foreman and beat him. I think for Mayweather to compare himself to Ali just shows his own insecurities, shows his own cockiness, shows his narcissism, and I don't see how anybody supports that kind of behavior. But you can't talk about what these guys do outside the ring and have that be the basis of what you think is going to happen inside the ring, because it doesn't work that way. Manny Pacquiao does a lot of charity work. He does a lot of things, and he has his own dark history with, cheating affairs and, his gambling and stuff. But when you compare the two, they're total opposites as far as their character and personality. Manny is much more humble, much more the role model kind of guy. Mayweather's more the flashy, cocky kind of guy. Definitely opposites. Mayweather, has had a history of domestic violence. Pacquiao's a family guy, so they contrast a lot. Even in the styles in the ring and the way they fight and the way they carry themselves is quite different from one another. So I think that's what makes the drama and a lot of this interesting. And if you don't watch a lot of boxing, this might be the good opportunity for you if you enjoy this fight and you're really getting into this fight, for you guys to go ahead and check out other fighters, because there are a lot of other fights that have these same kind of dynamics and these same kind of storylines with these fighters that really makes it interesting. If you just look at it as two men in a ring beating each other up and you're not looking at these different dynamics that I've been breaking down in this long video, then that's all it's going to be to you. It's just two guys beating each other up. But if you look at more of the deeper dynamics of it, and then boxing has such of a huge and long and crazy history that it's hard to ignore what's happening right now, because these are the two best fighters that we've seen in this, in the last 10, 15 years, and they're finally going to fight each other on May 2nd. I hope, one other comment, I hope that whoever wins, whether it's Pacquiao or Mayweather, that it's a fair decision if it goes to distance. I hope that the referee doesn't pull any craziness, like any kind of favoritism, any kind of early stoppages on either end. I wish both guys, the best of luck as far as that stuff is concerned. I am rooting for Manny Pacquiao. I do feel that he will pull this one out. And, I could be wrong, but I'm giving you my educated opinion, not my definitive prediction, because I think you'd be a fool to be able to say you absolutely 100% know. And then, of course, the trolls out there will, if your fighter wins, you're going to turn around and say, see, I told you, I knew all along. But then if they lose, there's always, some kind of excuse or reason why it didn't happen. But that's not what's going to happen here. I just wanted to give my breakdown, my opinion. If you stuck with me through this long video, I definitely appreciate it. And I'm not going to be doing too many more boxing videos. I may do one to follow up this one after the fight, but just to give my impressions of what happened. But this is primarily a video game channel and movies. But if you watched it, and if you're into boxing as I am and as passionate about it as I am, I'm glad that you stuck around. And if you're not and you stuck around, thanks again. Anyway, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And I do appreciate your time. Mastermind out.
Blasting y'all, overcasting y'all.